shall be just continuing because they are developing story like that story from the conflict on the update and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Security forces and the government that paints them in a very not so good light. So we shall get into the details of that and many other stories that I have for you from across the continent. But before we get to that, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and joining us today. Let me just first bring us up to date with the headlines very quickly, and we start with the newspapers from Kenya. The Standard newspaper, why Raila called off Jamhuri rally. Faced with a reluctant public battling high cost of living, an opposition reading from different scripts and pressure from the international community, Azimio la Umoja leader Raila Odinga is forced to cancel a protest rally planned to coincide with the December 12th National Day celebrations. First of all, my personal opinion was this was a bad idea, so I think it's good that this rally was cancelled. Mending fences in Western Kenya, President William Ruto is received by Court General Secretary Francis Atwoli. His working tour of Western Kenya yesterday. That story is on page 4. Why women are angrier today than 10 years ago. What? Who takes time to sit down and do such researches? But anyway, if you want to know why the women are angrier compared to 10 years ago, you go and read that from page 3 on Standard newspaper. Rebels killed 131 civilians in the DR Congo. That is according to the latest United Nations report. And as I said, I'll bring us the details of that. Sorry. Savannah up cement trade rivalry. That's on page 26. Egerton VC Council jailed for contempt. You'll find that in there. And then Daily Nation, World Bank's bittersweet pills for Kenyans. The lender has proposed a bag full of sensitive reforms to spur Kenya's economic recovery, handing President William Ruto's regime some tough choices of fueling growth while safeguarding investor confidence in the piecing a restless population scorched by high cost of living. You'll find that on page 7 on the Daily Nation. Why Raila called off his spiral Jamhuri rally. You find that on page 6. And audit projects in Uhuru's last term, MPs demand. That is on the back page. And school heads to wait longer for transfers back to home counties. Okay, and Kusi Ideas Festival opens with call for more climate funding. Okay. Very well, the Star newspaper. And mothers anguish over children slain by cops. They turned up in court to see an officer who was to be charged with extrajudicial killings. That story is on page 4 and 5. Why Raila is under fire over Ruto's hustler fund. You find that in there. And Charlene Ruto visits irrigation agency chair. Okay, she's been busy. That is just in there. Okay, so grab yourselves a copy if you are from Kenya and not. Also, they do have their copies online, so you can read more on those headlines and stories that I've just highlighted there. So let's look now at some regional newspapers. A new vision from Uganda. Otafire orders probe on opposition. Embrace mechanized agriculture, says Museveni. That is what we have. And then Daily Monitor, also from Uganda. EU sanctions Uganda trade over Congo fight. Okay, but they will not sanction the person who has been mentioned adversely in this conflict. Newsday from Zimbabwe. Government schools use parole raid. And then the Herald, also from Zimbabwe, major boost to electricity situation. The president attends colorful Basogo inauguration. Yes, that is the newly elected president of Equatorial Guinea. Remember the sham elections that they went to about 3 weeks ago? The president has served for 43 years and he had another 7 added. So President Mnangagwa attended his inauguration. Okay. The Nation from Zimbabwe, Emefiele, a review of cash withdrawal policy likely. And then The Guardian, we won't compromise. 2023 despite pressure, says Irabor. That is from Nigeria, and the Sowetan from South Africa are not preaching on trains. They preach on trains. I know here they preach on buses and these are the modes of public transport, but I've not heard any. Maybe I don't use the train so much. In love with Tanzania. Okay, and then the New Times from Rwanda. Rwanda, DR Congo, trade slightly declined, but growth remains. That is according to some official reports. And Rwanda UN partnership fruitful. That is according to Finance Minister in Rwanda. So that is what we have on some of the regional newspapers on their headlines there. So now let's just go to the detailed news bulletin, and we shall look at some of the stories that I have highlighted on the headlines there. And we start with Ghana. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta survived a vote of no confidence in Parliament on Thursday after the opposition accused him of conflict of interest and incompetence in managing the economy. The West African country is battling its worst cost of living crisis that has seen inflation rise to up to 40%. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta has denied any wrongdoing and has attributed the crisis to the combined impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In Parliament on Thursday, only 136 opposition members of parliament voted for the motion of no confidence after the majority MP staged a walkout ahead of the vote. Ghana is negotiating a $3 billion bailout plan from the International Monetary Fund (IMF) to stabilize the economy. It has been asked to restructure its domestic debt as part of conditions to secure the bailout, but investors have expressed some concerns. A group of lawmakers in Niger has backed a motion seeking to criminalize same-sex relationships in the country. The vast majority of Niger's population is Muslim, but it has a secular government, and there is currently no specific law on same-sex relationships. The MP says same-sex relationships are against the religious and cultural beliefs of the people. The proposal was presented to the Speaker of Parliament by Nana Jimbo Haruna, a lawmaker from the southern region of Maradi. She told a press conference on Thursday in the capital Niamey that the move was meant to protect the rights and interests of the public. Ms. Haruna described homosexuality as a problem affecting that society, and she also added and carried out wide consultations that the proposal had received the support of Nigerians, citizens, as well as nearly all members of parliament. The European Union has imposed sanctions on a number of people involved in the fighting in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. They include a spokesman for the M23 movement, Willy Ngoma. The M23 are blamed for causing instability and insecurity in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and carrying out human rights abuses, including sexual violence. The UN has accused the group of killing more than 130 villagers last week. The M23 denied the claim, blaming stray bullets to just 8 deaths. Among those subject to an asset freeze and a travel ban is a senior member of the Congolese army, Joseph Nganzo Olikwa Tepe. It reported that forces under his command carried out attacks against civilians, including rapes, between June and December last year. Also appearing on the list is a Ugandan Medi Nkalubo, who is said to be a top ADF rebel leader implicated in recruiting rebels, making of guns, and association with the militant Islamist state group. Eastern Democratic of Congo is home to dozens of armed groups, many of which are battling for a share of the region's mineral wealth. The EU has also sanctioned a Belgian-born businessman, Alain Goetz. He is accused of exploiting the instability to illicitly trade in natural resources. Religious leaders in South Sudan are calling on parties to the conflict in the oil-producing Upper Nile state in the north of the country to implement a ceasefire amid escalating hostilities. There are growing concerns that the renewed fighting might derail the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement, which was signed in September 2018 to end a 5-year civil war. There are also fears that the fighting could cause a humanitarian catastrophe in the region. The ceasefire monitoring body says the violence began in mid-November when tensions started building up between rival groups. Father Paulino Tipundang, chairman of the interdenominational Upper Nile Initiative for Peace and Reconciliation, said that heavy weaponry was being used by tribal youth in the ongoing hostilities. Heavy weaponry. Where are the local youths getting this heavy weaponry? Someone is sponsoring this chaos, and we shall get into the details of this because there was also another report that I would like for us to look at. As far as South Sudan is concerned, Now, authorities in Ghana say more than 8 million unregistered SIM cards have been blocked in the country after their owners failed to meet a final registration deadline. The disconnection of the mobile lines means their owners will no longer be able to make calls or access the internet, neither will they be able to use mobile money services. Ghana's Ministry of Communication and Digitization and the National Communications Authority had said the mandatory SIM card registration was to help fight crimes such as fraud to ensure digital security. The process started in October last year when the government issued a directive for people to register their mobile lines. And then a leading human rights group says that a domestic violence law introduced 5 years ago in Tunisia has failed to protect women. In a new report, Human Rights Watch has concluded that poor implementation of what it describes as one of the strongest laws against domestic violence in the Middle East and North Africa has left Tunisia women at risk. The group alleges that the Tunisian authorities have failed to systematically respond, investigate and provide protection to women who report violence. And then we go to South Africa. South Africa's former health minister, Zweli Mkhize, is the main contender to run against scandal-plagued President Cyril Ramaphosa to lead the ANC. The party in power since the end of apartheid 30 years ago meets next week to decide who will lead the country in the 2024 general election. The 66-year-old doctor by training and former minister feels that his experience made him ideally placed to respond to challenges on the ground. The ANC's branch in the strategic Zulu province of KwaZulu-Natal, which has the largest number of delegates, has given Zweli Mkhize massive support in the run-up to the ANC conference, which opens on this to control the money supply. The central bank limited weekly over-the-counter cash withdrawals to 100,000 naira, and that equates to about $225 for individuals, and 500 naira, that equates to $1,124 for corporations, with a processing fee required to access money. When the policy takes effect on 9th of January, ATMs will no longer dispense Nigeria's high denominations of 1,000 naira. That is equivalent to $2.25, and 500 naira, that is equivalent to $1.10, while withdrawals from ATMs and point-of-sale terminals are also to be limited to 20,000 naira. That is about $45 daily. Okay. Now, policymakers say the withdrawal limits and recent monetary initiatives from the central bank would bring more people into the banking system and curb currency hoarding, illicit flows, and inflation. So let me just get this straight. People are trying to go cashless to limit the number of people who have to access these banking halls. But according to Nigeria, they want more people on the banking halls to curb currency holding. So if you want a certain amount of money, then you have to walk yourself to a bank. In the current world, while people are running from that and a lot of banking halls are closing, Nigeria feels this will be the right way to curb some of this problem it has been having as far as its currency is concerned. Okay. We go to Burkina Faso, and the government in Burkina Faso has granted a license to a Russian mining company, Norgold, to operate and group. Burkina Faso's 17 industrial mines produce around 70 tons of gold per year. Gold production has replaced cotton as the leading export product. Moscow enjoys growing popularity support in Burkina Faso, while France, the former colonial power, is vilified since September 30th coup that brought Captain Ibrahim Traoré to power. Burkinabés have repeatedly demonstrated waving flags of Russia, a country with which they want their new leaders to intensify relations. Look at that. And then to the DRC, and M23 rebels killed at least 131 civilians in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo on November 29th and 30th, according to preliminary findings the UN mission in the country has said. Authorities in Kinshasa have said that some 300 people, almost all civilians, had died in M23 attacks in the village of Kishishe in the eastern North Kivu province. The group had denied being behind the massacre, blaming the stray bullets for the deaths of just 8 civilians. The victims were killed as part of reprisals against civilian population. The UN's MONUSCO mission said in an overnight statement adding that 102 men, 17 women and 12 children were arbitrarily executed by bullets or other weapons. The UN findings centered on the neighboring villages of Kishishe and Bamboo. Investigators could not go to the villages because of security concerns, but interviewed 52 victims and witnesses in the towns of Rwindi, 20 kilometers away. The mineral-rich east of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been restive for years, with numerous militias operating in the area. M23, a mostly Congolese Tutsi group, resumed fighting in late 2021. Our Biden administration hopes to use a gathering of 50 African delegates in Washington to uplift and empower African institutions, citizens and nations through discussions about challenges such as health, democracy, governance, investment, development, climate change, and more, senior administration officials confirmed yesterday. Participants in next week's U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit will spend 3 days in Washington discussing the challenges, needs, and hopes of 1/5 of the world's population spread over a landmass that is larger than China, India, and the continental U.S., and the most of Europe combined, and there are as many as 1/3 of world's languages are spoken. This year's summit, which begins on Tuesday, will focus on deepening and expanding the long-term U.S.-Africa partnership and advancing shared priorities, amplifying African voices to collaboratively meet this era's defining challenges. That is according to a senior administration official who said, and he said this while briefing reporters on the condition that their names would not be used, as is common with White House briefings. Another senior administration official said they will announce major deliverables and initiatives over the 3-day summit, but declined to give any further details. President Salva Kiir said he has been informed that some people are joining Thomas Cirillo because of the presence of cattle keepers in the equatorial region. Speaking during the closing of the SPLM National Liberation Council in Juba on Tuesday, the president advised cattle keepers to remove cattle from the equatorial region. This, he said, will stop people from joining the rebellion of Thomas Cirillo. President Kiir said some of those who left the equatorial region often come back with their cattle. This, according to the president, should be addressed. President Kiir urged cattle keepers to return their animals to their state to avoid cattle-related conflict in the equatorial region. He was speaking during the closing of the SPLM National Liberation Council in Juba on Tuesday. And still staying with South Sudan, a joint military operation of SSPDF, infantry and riverine forces against the armed militia is underway in Cholo Kingdom, a senior army officer has said. General Joaquino Fidel Nyikai says the military operation that started on Wednesday 7th is aimed at flashing out armed militia who attacked a civilian camp in Fashoda County in Upper Nile State. The deployment comes after President Salva Kiir directed the Chief of Defense, Santino Ndengwall, to deploy the SSPDF forces in the area. The deployment aims to quell the situation and restore peace. General Fidel, who visited the area on Tuesday, says SSPDF infantry and riverine forces began the offensive in the area. According to Fidel, since the attack, there has been no response from humanitarian organizations except the United Nations mission in South Sudan, which provided protection in Kodok. And still staying with South Sudan, a new investigative report by Sentry has exposed the National Security Service control over key sectors of the country, ranging from media to natural resources. The Sentry says the NSS plays a critical role in the capture of public institutions and revenue streams in South Sudan. It says published reports, correspondence, eyewitness accounts, and the corporate records indicate that the NSS has a broad set of tools and tactics for infiltrating and influencing public and private sector institutions for political economic gain. The report, titled Undercover Activities Inside the National Security Service's Profitable Playbook, details how the NSS has infiltrated almost every aspect of life in South Sudan. And that is where we end our news this morning. And I would like for us to just look at some, before I get to this Sentry report and the African leaders who are set to visit Washington next week, I want us to revisit the story of Burkina Faso. And you know, I've been saying these countries that are trying to sever their relationship with their former colonial masters in Western Africa France, and Burkina Faso is one of them, and we saw it close down RFI, which is a French radio station, I think owned by the French government, and it has been operating in all the Francophone countries in Africa and I think across the world. I think we also do have it here, if I'm not wrong. I see billboards around here, RFI, okay? So anyway, it is a national broadcaster, same as BBC, same as others that we've seen across the world. So it's really not a big deal, but you know, it has its basis so much in the West African countries because of obvious reasons, you know, the attachment to France as a country. So we've been seeing efforts by, and even from the start, anybody who understands the geopolitical, you know, politics, you would have known, you know, this was a proxy war in the making. Everything that you see play out there. Once they, right now, they're not getting along, Russia and other countries. So what they do is they export these proxy wars in places like Africa and places they feel one country has interest. And Russia has been specifically targeting countries where, you know, France has a lot of influence, and other European countries like, you know, Britain and its interest in some of the countries that they have very close ties here in the continent. But specifically, they've been, you know, on an assault to destabilize France's presence in some of its former colonies. And we've seen how that is playing out. We're not just saying this because we are saying. We've seen how that has played out in Central African Republic. We have now the Russian mercenaries, the Wagner group, that is now even offering personal protection for the president of Central African Republic. We've seen how Russia's mercenaries, the Wagner group, same, that I think is an arm of the Russian government, but the Russian government has always insisted that, you know, that is just a private group here, military group here in Russia, and so it has nothing to do with the Russian government. But come on, we know how these things work. We've seen their presence in Mali, and that really caused a lot of unquiet with some of the European powers that were there in trying to help Mali to take care of its insecurity concerns. You know, a country like Britain has already said it will pull out. Germany has given them until, when is it? Until May next year, because Mali said to go to its elections in February. So Germany has said, no, right now we can't pull out because we still will honor our commitment, but we will gradually you know, leave, but because of the state of the country right now, and the country is also expected to be preparing for its elections, which are meant to be happening in February, which I'm not sure if that will happen, but if we should still be here, we'll be looking to see if that will happen. And then, after you're done with the elections and you've settled down, 3 months later, we shall get the last of our troops from there, because, you know, we want to honor that agreement that we had while joining that team that was there to try to bring some stability and help in the fight against these extremist groups in Mali. And then, of course, France, it was very acrimonious falling out with the new authorities there in Mali. So France ambassador was even given an ultimatum: you have 72 hours to pack and ship. We don't want you here. And we saw how that happened, and since then things have not remained so very well. And then, in the middle of all that, the Russian mercenaries, they came in. Russia got an opportunity to take advantage of this. But now when you look at it, I think it was orchestrated very, very well. And I think Africa, we must really wake up and see how we are being played for the puppets that these powers sometimes think we are. And unfortunately, we play so well into their traps that we don't even get to realize until it's very late. Because I've always wondered, there's no way Russia will offer to come in and help if they're not getting anything out of it. There's no way France and these other powers were in this country to help if they're not getting something out of it. There's always an exchange. There's always an exchange. And when you look at the bigger picture, it is these countries that get to get the shorter side of the stick, if I might just use that word. It's always for their own advantage. You know, they will not They will not just order their troops to come to a country if they're not benefiting, if it's not advancing their foreign policy, if it's not advancing their interest. They must be getting something much out of any deal that they make or any situation they get themselves into. And then we're here just being happy that they're helping us with this and that, and, you know, taking care of our security situations and all that. So now we see the intentions of Russia in Burkina Faso play out, and now it's on the open, because as I have read there earlier, a Russian mining company, Norgold, will start operating a new gold mine in Burkina Faso. It's always about that. They can't come to a place where there's nothing for them. And a lot of times the interests are attached to the mineral resources. Look carefully. Look carefully. These countries that they are playing with, these countries that they're fighting to have influence on, they have some things that interest them, that will help in taking care of the economy, that they're going to benefit. So Russia has been, the government in Burkina Faso has granted a license to Russian mining company to operate a new gold mine. The operating permit is for a period of 4 years in an area situated in north and central region. The Russian company already operates 3 gold mines in the north of the country. I'm telling you. I don't know when Africa will wake up and just operate and look at these powers for who they really are, and look at the interest that they have in this continent for what they really are. They don't mean well. Nobody will come and give you a mercenary group if they're not coming here to protect their interest. Yes, and then while they're doing that, they're also fueling the conflict slowly in these areas. They're destabilizing. They're making sure that the conflict continues in their own ways that they know how, so that it scares any other player who might want to come in and also have some interest. And so we see their proxy wars, we see their interest play out in this continent in a way that is detrimental. And yet we still allow them. And yet we still complain about external interference. And we've just opened the door. We have an open door policy. We tell them to come, and when they leave that door open so that we can have another person come over and also exert their influence. So having fallen out with France, this had nothing, okay, fine. France is wrong in many fronts, and you know the history with France and its former colonies is it goes back, and there's a lot of things that don't even make sense, and a lot of agreements that they entered when France was leaving these countries, that France will continue to accrue some benefits that I think should be reviewed and must be reviewed, because it's unfair. It's very unfair for these countries. And now they want to get rid of France, but they're not getting rid of France. They feel France is a problem, but they're not getting rid of France. They feel they're getting rid of one problem, but it's not. You can't get rid of one problem and then allow for another problem to come. Because who knows how things will be now, that now we have this Russia have interest, and now they've been given, license to operate the latest gold mine, and they have also others. Other companies have also been given 3 gold mines before Russian companies. So it has nothing to do with them coming to help in stabilizing the security of Burkina Faso, or the security of Mali, or the security of Central African Republic. Since they came there and you fell out with France, what has happened? The insecurity has heightened. These coups that happen because, the governments are not doing very well. See, now I want to believe, because when you look at even the history of these coup leaders, and you start seeing where they went for training, where also they went for their military workshops or something, a lot of them have gone abroad, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Guinea. And so they have some ties, these coup leaders. So now, as I sit here and talk about this story, because we've been covering these coups and what has been happening, especially in those areas, you can easily jumped to a conclusion that even these coups were engineered by some people who had some other interest and had nothing to do. Of course, they said because of the insecurity, these army juntas. Well, now you are in control, and you are the army, and the countries are still insecure. So now, what is your excuse? What is your excuse? We've seen that nothing has changed. In fact, things have gotten to be worse, and sometimes they've accused France and other countries of now working with these other groups to continue causing insecurity, which I can't rule out, but there's no substantive, report to really confirm these allegations. But that has been ongoing. So these coups look like they were engineered because somebody somewhere had seen very far, and they really knew what they were doing. So they were engineered and they were planned so meticulously. And now you see how these strings are being pulled, and now, of course, the intentions are coming out very clearly. Africa, we have to wake up. We have to wake up. Otherwise, we'll keep singing about because that's what our leaders say. We are a sovereign country, so you can't tell us what to do. We are a sovereign country. We are able to make our own decisions. The decisions you're making are rubbish. The decisions you're making are sinking your country into pit holes that you might not be able to get out of. The decisions you're making are selfish and full of greed and has no interest of the country at heart. Okay, so that is the unfortunate a situation that we have to look and deal with today. So that story from Burkina Faso, I shall be following because I really want to know how that will happen. But hey, Rwanda, not Rwanda. We'll get to Rwanda in a short bit, but Russia is there, and Russia will benefit, and Russia will make whatever it is. It will milk whatever it is it can get from Burkina Faso. And I can tell you, this is just the beginning of a very long, drawn conflict that might not see the end of it, and that is quite unfortunate. Okay. Now, there's also another story that I would like for us to look at. All right, fine. Let me just get into this South Sudan story, and then we can look at that, the sanctions by EU. I'd like to know why they're sanctioning a section of the people, of players in this conflict, and they're not, sanctioning the key people who have been named, who there are reports that actually places them at the scene of crime in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I want to know why these sanctions are selective. So we will look at that very shortly. But let me just bring us up to date with what is happening in South Sudan. And the Sentry report, a new investigative report by the Sentry, has exposed the National Security Service control over key sectors of the country, ranging from the media to natural resources. Well, first of all, I'm not really surprised because, we cover South Sudan here every day, and South Sudan lacks strong institutions. I wonder if forget even strong institutions, does it even have these institutions really? Because it appears as though there are just few people in that country that are running the show, and so who just look after their own interest. Have we not looked at reports that have come out? Even their tax institution, like we have the Kenya Revenue Authority, the revenue institution that collects taxes in South Sudan, it has numerous bank accounts, and much of it goes to personal pockets, does not go to the Revenue Authority in South Sudan. So I'm not really surprised that this is the case, but let me just give us the details of some of the details of this report. The report sent to the newsrooms revealed that how National Security Service has covered control over the country by extending business operations across major sectors. And why is National Security Service involved in business? But apparently it does. Corporate records reviewed by Sentry reveals a vast network of companies with NSSS, that is the National Security Service, shareholders across the key sectors. These key sectors include the economic sector, financial sector, oil sector, and the media sector. So they have controlled key sectors in South Sudan. And it alleged that some senior national security officers are shareholders in some of these important sectors, as it is expected. South Sudan, they don't have private media houses. I know maybe one, but outside of that, all the media houses are owned by the government, and of course for obvious reasons, because South Sudan has been very unstable. So private investors have been scared of going to South Sudan and setting up shop. And so I think there's a lot of potential in South Sudan if only this government could just settle down and just allow the world to see South Sudan for what it's worth, to come in and help in developmental projects and just invest in different sectors in South Sudan. It's very ripe with opportunities, but the increased fighting and the increased insecurity has made people shy away to even think about, going and setting up shop in South Sudan. So the Sentry compiled a list of 684 members of the NSSS drawn from a roster of national security officers included in 2019 report by the UN panel of experts in South Sudan. The report also alleged that national security is protecting those commercial interests through surveillance, repression, and extreme brutality. The report mentioned 2 newspapers that are owned and managed by the national security, one of which is one of the 4 print newspapers in Juba. Okay, I'd like to read that and see how they cover their news. Okay. Sounds like something from Rwanda, I don't know. Now the report on the economic sector, the Central Report pointed out that the NSSS personnel have occupied key posts in state institutions, including the National Revenue Authority, where there's a lot of corruption, as I have explained there, and the National Oil Company, also there's a lot of corruption from there, and the Nile Petroleum Corporation, or Nile Pet, which also has a lot of corruption ongoing, and some reports before have shown. And on the financial sector, the report says that NSSS also involved in critical aspects of the financial sector, from taxation and revenue collection to banking and foreign exchange. The Sentry found that NSSS has significant international connections that may enable its operations in South Sudan and abroad. In the report, the co-founder of the Sentry, John Pendergast, says the country is burdened by a ruthless security that is willing to engage in state capture. And I'll quote what Pendergast, the co-founder, he's the co-founder. The other co-founder is George Clooney, Hollywood celebrated actor. Now, South Sudan, he says, is burdened by a ruthless, selective, and well-funded security service that is willing to engage in state capture, corruption, and repression to the detriment of South Sudanese people. That's what he said. He called on the international community to step up and ensure that the national security services' ability to both profit from and fund their gross human rights violations are restricted. Meanwhile, Lale Ahmed, a researcher at the Sentry, says in the report that the national security has been conducting censorship with impunity. It added that the service of South Sudanese engages in horrific human rights abuses and censorship, and does that with a lot of impunity, and the report continues. So in its recommendation, the Sentry says the government of South Sudan should immediately close all NSSS detention center and ensure that NSSS releases all detainees who have not been charged with crime or given a fair trial. It added that there should be an immediate, transparent, and impartial investigation into all allegations of NSS misconduct, including allegations of torture and sexual violence and other things that the NSSS has been doing in South Sudan. So I have not seen the response by South Sudanese government on these allegations and this report by Sentry. So I'd like to hear what the government of South Sudan will have to say to itself, and particularly the National Security Service. It's been accused of state capture, and it is involved in key sectors in South Sudan, and there has been a lot of corruption in these institutions that they're mentioning. There's been a lot of corruption that is being reported, and mismanagement of public wealth, and mismanagement of a lot of other things in South Sudan. So I'm really not surprised. Because it's not the first time that such a report is coming out of South Sudan. And as much as I don't expect the government of South Sudan to do much, because it has not, a lot of times it is implicated, so I guess it can't take a lot of any important action to act on or to further investigate on. And this is just a report, and this is a private investigation that was done with Sentry. But in some jurisdictions, when such a thing comes out, what will happen is the government institutions will take over perhaps and look at some of the issues that have been raised and investigate further by themselves, and then see what they do as far as the recommendation of this report is concerned, and what the investigations find out, if at all it matches what such a report has alleged. But that is not the case in South Sudan. So this is another report. This is another something that is painting the government of South Sudan in a bad light. What will happen is just it will be put on the shelves. Perhaps the government of South Sudan will come maybe today, and it will rubbish this report, and then it will gather some dust on the shelf there, and then life will continue, and nothing will happen. But it is such reports that even the United Nations Security Council or other institutions, especially like the key funders to South Sudan, like the US and the Troika, these are the kind of reports they look at in deciding on what help can we do, who can we sanction, and what actions can we take. So for them, these reports are very important. And as much as the government of South Sudan has always received such reports with some level of, we don't know what you guys are talking about, and that is not true, and not much seriousness. But these institutions and this country that have been partners and have been working with South Sudan, they normally base their assessment of South Sudan based on these reports. So it is very prudent. And I think the issues that are being raised here, President Salva Kiir and your government, they are very pertinent. So if I was you and your government, perhaps I would investigate. But how would you investigate? Well, the body that is meant to be investigating, the National Security Service, is the one being accused. That is where we have a problem, I think. And it's being accused of state capture, and it's being accused of being involved in the financial sector, the economic sector. Of course, that includes the oil sector, and of course the media, which we know is under government's control. Majority of the media houses, they are owned by the government, and the newspapers now that you're learning, others are managed by national security. So if you have the security apparatus of a country managing a newspaper, what kind of news comes out of South Sudan? This looks like a government-sponsored propaganda piece or something, I would imagine, because if it's owned by the National Security Council, surely you can't get anything fair and balanced and truth. There's nothing like, matter of fact, I think the headlines tomorrow will be this, or maybe today, is Sentry is lied or something. If it's manned by the government and it is manned by the National Security Service, these are just government propaganda pieces, and you can't rely on them to give you the exact picture of what is happening in South Sudan. So media is still under construction, if I can say that, in South Sudan. We don't have a lot of media outlets, like I have explained, because nobody wants to go to invest in South Sudan. People are still scared because they feel the country is unstable, and for good reasons, I think, to some extent it is. And so maybe this is why there are such things. When you look at such reports, then you'll understand why the leadership in South Sudan is very reluctant as far as even transiting is concerned. Because I've said here, they benefit so much according to how things are right now. So the status quo must be maintained by all means necessary. And when you read such a report, now you can understand why even having the elections that we're supposed to have the end of next year, now they say they'll have them in 2025. So I hope they'll have them at the beginning of 2025. No, they're supposed to have them at the end of 2024. So now the news we were covering here, it's in 2025. So perhaps it's in somewhere in January, February, I don't know, around there. But they'll keep pushing such dates. they'll keep pushing such dates because they do not want to have elections. And, there have been a renewal of communal fightings and clashes in South Sudan in some areas. And yesterday I was telling you how President Salva Kiir said that he will not interfere and he will not send help. And I think I criticized him here yesterday thoroughly. And I think maybe some South Sudanese also up there are not happy with those sentiments, and maybe the international community, because how can you say you're not going to interfere and intervene in a place that is conflict-ridden, and the leadership of that area is asking for help because they are unable to contain the level of violence that the people are experiencing there and that is ongoing. And so, he changed tune, and I was just reading from one of the media outlets there in South Sudan, and another government official, some lady, I can't remember her name, she was like, I know that is not what President Salva Kiir meant, but he has already sent help. So, well, I guess people had to make noise, because how do you say that as a head of state? So he did send some help, so hopefully that will help in quelling the situation in that area, the Upper Nile, that has been quite restive. And religious leaders are also becoming very unsettled with the way government is handling some, especially the security issues in South Sudan. And Father Paulino T. Pondeng, the chairman of the interdenominational Upper Nile Initiative for Peace and Reconciliation, has said there are growing concerns that the renewed fighting might derail the implementation of the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. I think this is in the heart of the increased violence in South Sudan. I've taken us through the revitalized peace agreement, the South Sudan's revitalized peace agreement of 2018, and some of the agendas that were agreed. There are about 8 chapters I think I've taken us through a couple of times, and we get to understand this was like a working constitution for them. It was supposed to be a working transitional document that had captured everything that needed to be captured around that time, to allow South Sudan transit and maybe finally sit down and they go through the process of constitutional making and things like that. And they don't want to implement this revitalized peace deal. Remember the last time I was talking to you about the hybrid court? That was also one of the requirements of this peace deal, as far as accountability, healing, reconciliation, truth-telling, and all that was supposed to happen. That was, I think, contained in chapter 5 of the revitalized peace agreement. And this hybrid court was supposed to bring to book, or is supposed to bring to book, the people who are mostly responsible for what has been happening, for the killings that have happened since 2013 when the war broke, just 2 years after South Sudan had had its independence. So a lot of the people on the top of the leadership of South Sudan will have to show up and, at the hybrid court. If we want to truly look at accountability, all these figures, majority of them have been implicated in what has been happening in South Sudan. So I think they are escaping accountability. They're escaping accountability, and the reason why I join in having concerns like what Father Paulino Deng is saying, and he's saying this fighting might derail the implementation. And I think this fighting sometimes are even sponsored, because as long as we continue fighting, as long as there appears to be instability, as long as it appears, we're not settled, nobody will pressure us about having an election. Nobody will pressure us about implementing the revitalized peace agreement, because there's a fighting that is ongoing, and that is the priority. And we have to take care of that right now, so everything else can wait. So this conflict, I now want to believe, from what I've been seeing and the decisions that the leadership of South Sudan is making, they could as well be sponsored. And it is, there's a report that showed government forces. There's a conflict that was happening earlier. Was it back in April or thereabout? And another report said that even government forces were involved in the fighting, a certain community. So these fightings, this conflict is a well-orchestrated conflict because leaders want to maintain a status quo, because leaders don't want to move forward in implementing the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. So as long as they keep taking the country in a circle, you know, of conflict, then nobody will want to hold them accountable. Nobody would want to pressurize them over these other matters that they should be taking care of. So they have to maintain this conflict. I'm not accusing anybody, but from everything else that we've been reading and from everything else that is happening in South Sudan, you can't vote past certain things there. So anyway, that is the central report for you. Okay. Now let's get into the Democratic Republic of Congo, another report that came out yesterday from the United Nations mission in not in South Sudan. In South Sudan is MINUSMA. In the Democratic Republic of Congo is MONUSCO, I believe. Now, M23 rebels last month massacred at least 131 civilians in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and committed more than 24 rapes, according to preliminary probe into the killings. The UN mission in the country has said. The government has said some 300 people, almost all civilians, died in the massacre in North Kivu, a province between the 29th and 30th of November. The group has denied any responsibility, blaming stray bullets for the deaths of just 8 people. So they're saying, yeah, we might have killed some people there, but you know, we're not targeting them. They were just, they were caught in the crossfires, and anyway, we just killed 8 of them. As if that does not even matter. One life is already too much to be lost. And so the UN says it's around 131, and somewhere up there, the government had said over 300 people had been killed. So between the government and the UN, I don't know who has the right figures. But yesterday, as I was taking you through the ethnic divisions that keep fueling this war in Democratic Republic of Congo, we saw how even in some instances, these militia groups and the actors involved, how they inflate figures when it comes to certain things. So just to stroke tensions and things like that among the people there, and to just you know, for them to get sympathy and support from whatever side that they're seeking to get sympathy and support for. So let's just go with the UN missions report. So they're saying 131 people had been killed. And the evidence comes from witnesses and other sources, as investigators were unable to reach the villages where the massacre took place, which means the toll could change, MONUSCO warned. Residents, all right, so M23 last month massacred that much number of people, and the victims, 102 of them were men, 17 were women, and 12 were children. And they were arbitrarily executed by bullets or knives. It said, according to this report, 8 people were wounded by bullets and 60 others were kidnapped. At least 22 women and 5 girls were raped. And the violence was carried out as a part of a campaign of murders, rapes, kidnappings, and looting against 2 villages in Rutshuru territory as reprisals for the clashes between the M23 and other armed groups, the statement said. The probe carried out by the UN Joint Human Rights Office, UNJHRO, and MONUSCO centered on events in the neighboring villages of Kishishe and Bambo. Investigators could not go to the villages, as I have said, because of security concerns. Now, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has been restive for years, and dozens of militias operate in the region, many of them legacies of 2 regional wars that raged at the end of the last century. The M23, a costly Congolese Tutsi group, resumed fighting in late 2021 after lying dormant for years, and the group spokesperson Lawrence Kanyuka lashed out at the UN report as sham, and he said it is regrettable to see a respectable organization compile a report that has been completely fabricated. And Kanyuka said the group had told MONUSCO several times that it could come to Kishishe to carry out its investigations. Instead, he charged MONUSCO went and did an investigation 20 kilometers away and decided to bring out a report which supports the accusations of Congolese government. This shows it is biased. Local inhabitants who spoke to AFP last week recounted that the rebels had pressed them into burying victims at Kishishe in mass graves. In a statement, MONUSCO said M23 members reportedly buried victims' bodies themselves in wood, may be an attempt to destroy the evidence. So this conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo is sometimes it's quite interesting. So these rebels that now we have constituted an East African community force to go fight, and MONUSCO is also there, but MONUSCO's mandate is different, I think, from that of the East African community. But even for the East African community forces that are already there, Kenya included, we've not had any reports of them having, used any kind of hard power against, these rebels, especially the M23, because it appears that is why the East African community forces were, that is the mandate, that was the order, go and fight, particularly these people, because the rest of the rebel groups, majority of them were meeting here in Nairobi for a mediation process, and a lot of them agreed to put down, the arms, and I think they expressed their concerns and their grievances and all that. So some progress was made in that regards, but M23, was never allowed to come to the table, so they're never a part of the conversation. And they're saying, because we are really not part of the conversation, we cannot be allowed to, you don't expect us to be implementers of these things that you have decided over there without us, and then you want us to be the ones to come here and do what you want us to do. But a couple of times they've changed their mind, and they've said, we are willing to actually put the arms down, but we want a direct talk to the president of the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, because they were saying they did not have confidence of the mediation process that was ongoing here, because obviously they're not included in that mediation. And one of the key demands by the Democratic Republic of Congo government, or the meeting that was held in Angola, was that before M23 is allowed to come to the table and speak, because the government of our DRC does not want to have them, to talk to them at all. But one of the two key demands was they must leave those territories that they have taken from the DRC illegally. They must surrender, and they must retrieve back to wherever they are coming from. And also, they must lay down their arms. If you're coming to talk, then you must come with your hands up or hands down, I don't know, but those hands should not be holding any weapons with them. That is the only necessary condition for us to have a conversation. So those are two demands, and you will sit and think, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. But the M23 have been reluctant, and I think just the other day they issued a statement, and they said that they also do have evidence that the Rwandan government, through its forces and the FDLR, they are targeting the local Tutsi community inside the DRC. Yesterday, we were looking at, if you watched that show in the afternoon, you'll understand what I'm saying. So they're saying if the government keeps doing that, then we will be forced to come in and protect our people. They feel this is their people. These are their people. And so they're saying the government of the DRC is targeting the local Tutsi community, the Nyamulenges, or they're known as Nyarwandas, as I was explaining to you yesterday. So it's very, very complicated, and it has so many angles. I wonder how the mediators were even going through, just sifting through what is the priority now, what can we address now, what is the, but I think the priority was the cessation of hostilities, and that was, I don't know if it's still holding right now. So the M23 was inviting MONUSCO to go and do, and this team from the United Nations Joint Human Rights, to go and do the investigations in these areas that M23 had taken, and over these murders that happened. M23 is saying, we invited you to come, but this group from the UN is saying, no, we couldn't access these areas because of obvious reasons of security concerns, so we could not go. And M23 is saying, no, probably we would have offered you some security as you do your investigations. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. It's a very organized rebel group. And, Rwanda has been mentioned yesterday while we were talking, when we were talking about this matter. I told you that the military office of M23 is in Rwanda. No, the military office of M23 is in Uganda. The political office is in Rwanda. Okay? So these countries somehow has that involvement, and that is those are facts that are out there. Even the Rwandan government has admitted, yes, we do have their political office here, but the military office is in Uganda. So why are you not also asking Uganda what is going on there and the involvement? But what I found to be interesting, according to investigations, because, you know, Rwanda has been saying they have nothing to do with the support of M23, is when you look at the fact on the ground is even the uniform that these M23 are wearing, their helmets, their combat uniform, they resemble those of Rwandan army. And they resemble those of Rwandan forces who are right now fighting the extremist groups in Mozambique, because they're invited there by Mozambican government, but also France. Now that brings me to the sanctions that have been put forth by the European Union, which I think is quite hypocritical. And I don't know why the country like Britain has been quite, has been quite silent, but I'll tell you why in a minute. Now, the European Union has imposed sanctions on a number of people involved in the fighting in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. They include a spokesman for the M23 rebel, Willy Ngoma. So they just go for other people. Now that is the spokesperson for M23. I don't know if he was interested in even going to EU at all. I don't know. And the M23, the UN also accused the group of killing 130. I've told you about that. Among those subject to an asset freeze and a travel ban is a senior member of the Congolese army, Joseph Nganzo Olikwa Tipi, also from the Congolese army. He's also been said to have committed crimes. And also appearing on the list is a Ugandan, Medi Nkalubo, all right, who is said to be a top ADF. This is also another rebel group that Uganda has been pursuing inside the DRC, implicated in recruiting rebels, making of guns, and association with a militant Islamic State group. And the EU has also sanctioned a Belgian-born businessman, Alain Goods. He's accused of exploiting the instability to illicitly trade in natural resources. Okay, so they've sanctioned a few people. I don't know if these people who have been sanctioned, if at all, that will hold any meaningful pressure against this group to surrender, because sanctions are tools used in diplomacy to put pressure on some actors to stop aggression in most cases, or to stop certain decisions that they've made and pressure them to choosing a different way of engagement. So I don't know, but usually the sanctions are meant to be so biting, and they usually are meant to be targeting actors who, when these sanctions are put on, there will be some effect felt. There will be some level of, effect. So I don't know if these individuals that the EU have have imposed these sanctions on, how that will change the activities of the rebel groups, of these M23 rebels and these other rebel groups that somebody like the Ugandan Medi Nkalubo was accused to be supporting the ADF, a leader. Okay, and you would wonder why are we not seeing sanctions? Why are we not seeing the international community coming so hard on even Rwandan President Paul Kagame? Because even the US itself, and they've kept saying, even just on Monday, I think, the US Secretary General Blinken had a conversation with the Rwandan president, and he's reiterated what the US has been saying. Stop supporting the M23 rebels. That's what he said. And they've accused Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels, the US itself, numerous times. And we've also seen an investigative report by the United Nations themselves, independent investigators saying Rwanda is indeed involved in supporting and equipping M23. And such bodies, when they speak, usually they're taken by very, very seriously, and immediately you would see some actions follow in terms of sanctions or other ways and means of, exploring diplomacy in order to even push an individual or an actor, especially in a conflict like this, to change their position or whatever it is they're doing to fueling a conflict. But we've not seen such an approach towards Rwanda or towards Paul Kagame, despite of all these reports coming out and implicating Rwanda of being involved. And of course, there are other actors in here. The president, the country of Democratic Republic of Congo under President Felix Tshisekedi have also been accused of supporting the FLDR, which, by the way, the Congolese government has not come out to refute these claims. So if you're being accused and you're silent, the assumption is maybe there is some truth in these allegations. And on top of that, what M23 was saying, the MONUSCO, which now they're calling bias, they're saying MONUSCO is supporting the forces in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And these forces are working with this militia group, the FLDR, to fight them. So essentially, MONUSCO is supporting a militia group. Okay, that is how they're reasoning. And when you sit down and think about it, if that indeed is what is happening, then MONUSCO might as well be in support of a militia group who's working with the government forces to fight the M23. So they're saying this M23 is saying this UN mission, MONUSCO and this other United Nations Joint Human Rights Office that did these investigations is biased, and because they are leaning towards the Democratic Republic of Congo and they're just painting M23 as the wrongdoers, and yet the other side is also committing these atrocities, and they only killed 8 people anyway. That's what they're saying. So it's really not a big deal. I think they're used to killing people so much that 8 is just change. It's not really a big deal, to them. So you wonder why, even with the adverse mentioning of Rwanda, because it has been mentioned so much since the start of this renewed conflict there. Rwanda has been mentioned so much, and we've seen the attitude of Rwandan leadership, and we saw what President Paul Kagame said the other day, which left a lot of tongues wagging. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean the DRC does not want to have an election? That's why the DRC does not want peace in the country. What do you mean President Tshisekedi was not duly elected and he does not want another election, and he might lose another election if elections were held? Does it mean you had your preferred candidate? What do you mean? There are things he said that, should not be taken lightly in the diplomatic circles. And if you just interrogate it slowly, it has a lot of weight, and perhaps it can clearly show us or give us just a peek of what Rwanda thinks and Rwanda's position in this conflict. And the reason why Rwanda perhaps will not be touched right now, they'll just be issuing these conversations and Twitter, the digital diplomacy and all that, is because Rwanda, a country, have you heard Britain condemn Rwanda? They can't. Because Britain had that agreement with Rwanda to bring in the refugees and paid Rwanda to receive the refugees who were going to Britain. And so it's working with them to do their dirty job for them and to take advantage of whatever it is. So for that reason, because Britain is benefiting from its partnership with Rwanda, and President Paul Kagame agreed to have these refugees brought to Rwanda, and Britain is paying Rwanda to take in these refugees. So Britain is already compromised. So it has no moral authority to even speak against what's happening in Rwanda. And that's why you've been seeing Britain has been very quiet. And will be one of the countries that will be loudest in terms of condemning what is happening now in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the alleged involvement of Rwanda in this conflict. Another country that keeps issuing statements, but it's doing nothing, and the reason why Rwanda cannot be sanctioned. And you know what? Rwanda depends so much on foreign aid and donor funding and partnership with the Western countries that if they just switch that tap, Kigali will feel it. If they just imposed a couple of sanctions on Rwanda, Paul Kagame, or these allegations that are being put on Rwanda he will have to change his mind, or the country will have to look at a different approach, because they will feel it. Its economy is supported by outside donor funding, outside donor collaborations, and countries from the Western world. You know, after coming out of genocide, and Paul Kagame has done a good job in stabilizing that country. However he does it, his style, that is not what is up for discussion right now. So the country is so dependent on the Western partnerships and cooperations and working relations. So if they just close down a bit of that, if they just took action today, like they did a couple of years ago, then we will see this M23 retrieve back. But they refuse to do that. And a country like France is pretending to come out and condemn what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And France is the one, and European Union, did it not give Rwanda some money in support of I don't know what? And Rwandan forces are in Mozambique right now, fighting in the Cabo Delgado. And you know, Cabo Delgado, France has a lot of interest, France and the United States, because Total owns key major oil and exploration and gas, and natural gas exploration company there, the largest, followed by Exxon from the United States. And so this is Total is France, and France is Total, right? We know that. And so Rwanda is in Mozambique. We know they went to fight this extremist group, the local Al-Shabaab in Mozambique. But Rwanda is there to help France protect its interest in Mozambique. And the uniform the Rwandan forces are wearing in Mozambique, from the helmet down to the boots, they are similar to those M23 has while fighting in Rwanda. And that is according to the United Nations report. Another surveillance camera showed a lot of Rwandan soldiers, so I mean, maybe they're not Rwandan soldiers, but a lot of M23 coming from, and at one night they captured around 500 fighters, coming from the Rwandan border, entering the Democratic Republic of Congo in the middle of the night. These are reports by MONUSCO. So I know people have been saying, why is Rwanda being accused? Where is the proof? There's a lot that actually, if the world, the international community was serious about coming in and putting pressure on these players, there's enough information to warranty sanctions. There's enough information to warranty an action being taken. But they can't, because this country is protecting their interest, like I've explained in Mozambique. The Rwandan forces, they're helping protect the interest of France in the Total oil, in Exxon oil. And we saw after the Rwandan forces went, I think their battle hardened. We saw some progress being made as far as normalcy returning. Of course, it's still far from it, but that is the reason why. So while they're out here condemning what is happening in the DRC, but they're also funding the same person they're condemning. So the international community is complacent in what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo. A country like Britain is compromised. A country like France is compromised. Belgium is compromised, and they are the ones who are issuing these statements. We have information, we have investigations. Why are you not taking action? Why are you giving the rest of the actors here in East Africa a hard time while you continue to fund the same people who have been adversely mentioned to be involved in this conflict? Why are you not putting sanctions? And the people that are choosing to putting sanctions on, these are actors that will not bring such a needed amount of change. And as far as this conflict is concerned, you must put sanctions on people who are responsible. You must put sanctions on people who will feel the sanctions, not on actors who will make no difference. Okay? The spokesperson of M23, he doesn't care that he can't come to Europe. He doesn't care. The spokesperson of ADF, he doesn't care that he can't come to Europe. They don't care. So these sanctions that you placed on them will not be biting. There's a reason why sanctions are put in place. You just don't put sanctions and just pick and choose on names that you know will have no impact at all, so that you look like you're doing something and you're not. Look for the main actors in this war. Stop funding these countries. Just close that tap of help that you give to these countries just for a couple of weeks and see if this war will not turn, and see if these actors that have been adversely mentioned will not do different, and see if M23 will not pull away from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Try putting real sanctions, intentional sanctions, strategic sanctions, with the aim of stopping this madness that is ongoing in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, Rwanda, Uganda, they sell minerals that they don't even own in their own countries, because they are benefiting and they're getting them from the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've seen reports show that, and of course Uganda is guilty. It's already paying, making some reparations. It's paying $65 million per year for the next, I think, 4 years or 6 years or so, after the International Court of Justice ruling that was made a few months ago over its involvement in the ongoing conflict. And Burundi as well is mentioned in there. Yesterday I was explaining, when I was giving a chronological how this war has been and how the ethnic balkanization has really acted in fueling this conflict. And we saw this position that Burundi is playing with its involvement with other militant group, the Red Tabara, I think that's what they're called. Okay, and we've seen how that has played. Now, you're having Burundi, you're having Uganda, the same actors that have been accused, the same people who have caused pain in there. Those are the same people that the EAC has decided will come back and be a savior and not try to get a solution there, while they have their interest, while Uganda and Rwanda's rivalry will start playing out there. And I think after that is when we saw a renewed, even spirited fight from the M23. So we have to be serious about getting a solution in this conflict, and the things that needs to be done must be done. Let's stop skating around issues. We will never get a solution, and the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo who have suffered long suffering, they'll continue to suffer, while this international community continue to be complacent, and we're left here trying to scrape at whatever mediation, at whatever help that you're trying to give to the DRC, while we know this is a bigger scheme. This conflict is a representation of a lot of interest and a lot of players who are committed to not having a peaceful Congo because they're benefiting. China has huge mines there in the DRC. There's so many actors in there that benefit. And so we, as African community, we're left to do the heavy lifting, while they are committed to not seeing a peaceful and a stable DRC. I think it has to come to a time where enough is enough, and we call it as it is, so that we can actually find a solution to what is happening in Rwanda, in what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And MONUSCO, I think the mandate needs to be changed. The East African community, we want to hear some action. We want to hear there are some reports that actually these killings have stopped. We can't keep having people going there, countries spending a lot of money, East African community paying for this process, and it does not even have money, because even countries like South Sudan are struggling to pay their fee there, and other countries have not been consistent like Burundi. So it is struggling even to maintain its own operations. So we can't have the little that we have there to run the affairs in this community now being directed there, and then at the end of the day we are not going to get any results. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of resources, because we are not looking at the issues. Nobody wants to talk about the issues. Nobody wants to tackle the main problem. So we keep skating. We keep making some movements, but there's no progress. We're just moving around, but there's no progress. That is the most unfortunate thing about this whole conflict. And these sanctions by European Union, this is nothing. Put sanctions on the people that are supposed to be having these sanctions. And then maybe we will see your seriousness. Otherwise, you are complacent. The international world is complacent. The European Union countries that are benefiting from the Democratic Republic of Congo coming out here telling us about human rights and all these things, they are complacent and they're benefiting very much. The companies that are attached to some of these countries are benefiting from DRC, and they're just out there sitting and waiting to see how these foolish Africans are trying to find a solution on this conflict while they know what they're doing. We have to be real so that we can get a solution. And then maybe, just maybe, the Democratic Republic of Congo can be left to itself to rebuild, to find and to unite its people, without this external interference that has ensured that this country cannot remain and will never be peaceful. That is a commitment that some of these players have made. So we have to be careful, even as we look to see how this new process. Now, M23, a rebel group, is very emboldened there. It is the one now giving us updates about, hey, we told the UN team to come this side that we are to do their own investigations. They refused. What? We're having a rebel group now trying to negotiate with the UN team? Why are we even having conversations with them? Okay, if there's such a problem, why? Interesting. Okay, I'll just leave that there for right now. I want to thank you so much for your time and for being with me this morning. Charles, a very good morning to you and the rest of you who are watching us, wherever you're watching us from. I will not get into the stories of Nigeria right now. There's too much ongoing there, and you have a bigger fish to fry in the name of Tinubu, your next presidential hopeful. So it's too much going on up there. But thank you so much for your time during the week. I think those are some of the stories that we've been looking at and they've been developing. And so we shall continue updating you on the latest and some of this and more news items from across the continent of Africa. Thank you so much. I wish you a wonderful weekend. Hopefully we can meet here on Sunday, 2 p.m. East African time for Africa Showdown, where we shall continue bringing you up to date with the latest from the continent. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Thank you for watching and bye-bye for now.